Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you. If you are a first-time listener, welcome to the program. We're glad to have you in the conversation. Two things for us, if you could. Don't forget to subscribe so you get all the latest updates when we drop a new episode. And then, I'm not bashful. I'm not afraid to beg. And in fact, I've got a collar on today, so I'll call myself a well-dressed beggar. And we'll beg for those 5 stars. So if you think that we're doing a good job, hit us up with those stars in the stores. For those who coming back, we appreciate your listenership. There's over 2.4 million podcasts in the marketplace. So there's plenty of choices out there for people to listen to. So thank you. And because of your listenership and our great guests, which we have another one today, we've cracked into one of the fastest growing podcasts internationally in any genre. And it's really fun. Now we have listeners in 32 countries across 6 continents. And if I could figure out a way to market to those pesky penguins, and then probably more important, help them recharge their cell phones, we would have listeners in Antarctica. So I have a new feature I'm welcoming in because our show is listened to in just a little under 500 marketplaces around the globe. So I'd like to welcome to our friends in Ogallala, Nebraska. So if you're in Ogallala this afternoon, glad to have you. If you have not been to Ogallala, well, then you need to stop by and check out Lake McConaughey out in Ogallala, Nebraska. So welcome to our fans in Ogallala. All right, so the show's all about people, their stories. So we're going to introduce our next guest. I'm excited to have him on. There's some fun connections because he's a veteran and served in the same unit as my father. So always great to have somebody on from the 82nd Airborne. There's nobody better than the 82nd Airborne. So, I've had a lot of guests on from different areas, but it's always great to have an 82nd Airborne with us. So in addition to a veteran, and he did serve, and we're thankful for his service, he is a podcaster, so he's a peer of that. He's also in Colorado, so I like that. So, I don't have to, if the system breaks down this afternoon, I might be able to scream out the window and he can hear me. And he's a certified emotional intelligence expert. And I'm excited to talk about this because this is an area that I just love. And it's so important for us as individuals. And so with no further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show, Noble Gibbens. Noble, how are you?
Rex, man, I am stoked, man. Thanks for having me. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's fun. We were talking off air. We probably could have talked for a couple hours off of air. And we thought, dang, we got to get recording here. But it's always great to have somebody from my dad's division of the service, the 82nd Airborne, United States Army, 82nd Airborne. So welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Rex. And I want to clarify. Rex shared that I am a podcast peer. He is actually a PhD podcaster, and I am a kindergarten podcaster.
Everybody's a peer. Everybody's a peer. So, and we talked off there. Maybe with a little bit of help in the sandwich or two, we'll get you flying so fast. So, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Rex.
So, our show is all about people's stories. I have always been a consumer of biographies. I love to learn the human stories. People don't know things like, I'll give you an example. Milton Hershey, the founder of Hershey's Chocolate, the most successful chocolate company in the world. Well, Milton filed bankruptcy 7 times in the candy industry before the 8th time he made it. No one would call Hershey's a failure. So success doesn't fall out of the sky. It just doesn't. Now, a few months ago, we had some airplane parts fall out of the sky. There was a United Airlines flight that lost a whole bunch of airline parts, and they were about 3 blocks from my house. But success doesn't do that. Success doesn't fall out of the skies. It's a journey. So what I'd like to do, Noble, today, as anybody's listened to our shows, we'd like to understand your story because we are accumulation of our experiences, our talents, things we've been through, struggles, whatever. So now this is a long list, so don't worry. I will bug you and I'll make sure we cover all of these. We want to go back in time and we want to learn your story. So we want to know where you were born, okay? And then also where you grew up, because that can be very different. I had a guest, Ellie Soja, who moved 63 times before she was 15, in and out of refugee camps and stuff like that. So it's important to know where else did you grow up? We also want to know about, do you have siblings? And if you do have siblings, did any of them survive your harassment? So that's something that we would want to know about. Like to know about what you did as a kid, what were your interests? So things you might have been doing, sports or computers or drama, theater, dance, music, shoplifting. And don't laugh, I had a guest on, Larry Cole, who by the age of 15 was a car thief. So, people do different things as they are growing up. Then we also want to know about your parents, and parental influence is huge. In all my interviews, I found that parental influence generally is 3 types that I've seen. One is the huge support system. So the parents that are just, helping you through everything, just there to launch your life. Then there's sort of the people the parents are there, but not fully present because they're working so hard just to eke out a living and those types of things. And then unfortunately, there are parental examples where that example might be, oh my goodness, that's so bad. I don't want to be anything like that. Okay. Then we want to learn about your education and hopscotch around that for a little bit. Obviously, we're going to talk about being in the military, the influences that created with you. And then we just want to hopscotch through some pivot points of life where you made some influences. And then I'm excited to talk about the emotional intelligence and what you're doing today, the courses that you provide with that, and the impact you're having on the world. So I know that's a long list. Don't be intimidated, Noble. So take us back. Where were you born?
So thanks again, Rex. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm super excited. I feel like I'm talking with a podcast celebrity right now. So I'm stoked.
I don't know about that.
And I took notes here. I'm taking notes here. So I wrote down all the stuff. So I was born in Norman, Oklahoma, and then shortly after moved to Illinois. But my dad was going to med school, and then my mom was teaching Spanish. So my dad's a big, giant white guy. He was a 6'3.5", 285-pound teddy bear, real chill, laid back dude. And then my Scottish, English, Irish, and then my mom was a 4'10" little Hispanic lady. so I look like my dad, but I can also habla. So my mom raised me speaking Spanish, oddly enough, and so I can habla, and I speak to my daughter in Spanish, who's now a teenager, 13 years old. And so born in Oklahoma, then moved at 5 years old, moved from Oklahoma to Illinois.
Now, were you up in the Chicagoland, or were you in a different part?
So 3 hours south of Chicago, kind of central Illinois. It's about, so my first little town was 2 words, Podunk,
okay.
Illinois, Podunk, Illinois, off of little Highway 24. It's called Gridley, Illinois, which is about 40 minutes south of Bloomington, Illinois.
Okay.
And then was raised there. We literally had one yellow flashlight, a 60-year-old cop who never aged. Like, he stayed 60 as long as I remembered. It took me 5 minutes to ride my little BMX bike across the town. It was a little farming community. My dad was started out as a little family doctor for the little town. Okay. And then shortly thereafter, when I was in sophomore in high school, we moved to a big giant city for me, which was called Charleston, Illinois, which is about 45 minutes from Champaign-Urbana, which had 10,000 people in the city, 20,000 when the university was in session. And so my second high school was as big as my first town. So wow. 1,000 people in the high school, my second high school. So
that's great. So what were you interested in as a kid? What did you do in your spare time?
So I super sports guy, sports, did football and basketball were kind of my two primary sports. And one of the other things that we did too, I don't know if I ever shared this even on a podcast, my mom, so my mom is one of those ladies who, if she saw a drug addict on the side of the road, or she'd pick them up, come to the house, stay with us for the weekend or a week or however long. And so one of the things that we did as a kid, in terms of one of the things that I did, was we had a children's home that was in our town, little small town, again in Gridley. There's a little children's home where we would get inner city kids from Rockford and Chicago, the inner cities from gangs, that kind of thing. And we would pick them up. We'd take them to church with us. And then after church, we'd go play hoops all day.
Oh, nice.
With the kids and stuff. So it was a great way. And so, they'd be Puerto Rican kids, they'd be black kids, they'd be there'd be Asian kids, they'd be name the ethnicity, and and then of course my house, again, my mom raised me speaking Spanish, so I was raised around all kinds of minorities, and it was awesome. Exposure, it was awesome. Way to grow up, playing hoops, and then again I played football as well.
Nice. So so you graduated then, was it in Champaign? What was the second town?
So it's called Charleston, Illinois, which is 45
okay.
minutes from Champaign. Yeah.
Okay.
Graduated high school there in Charleston.
Okay. So sports was your big thing there. Now, how about siblings? Do you have siblings?
So I had an older sister who would be 4 years older than me. My parents, so this is when they lived in Oklahoma, my parents were going on a date night, and my sister was let's see, man, how old was she? I want to say 6 or 7 months old, maybe a little bit older. And the babysitter had a 5-year-old son that kicked her in the chest and killed her.
Oh,
and
no.
so my sister would have been 4 years older than me. And that was obviously super traumatic for my folks. I can't even imagine, right? As a parent now,
Yeah.
I can't even fathom, what that experience was like. And then they had me, and then 6 years later they had my sister. So I've got a younger sister who's 6 years younger than me, who's still in Illinois, Chicago area.
So were you pretty close with your sister then?
So because we were 6 years apart, it was almost like she was, almost like a generation is extreme, but there was enough separation where it was almost like we grew up separately.
Yes.
To a degree, so when I was in high school, she was in, so we were not super close, but I guess as close as you can when you're 6 years apart.
Yeah, 6 years is a big gap. You start to get there. The biggest gap in my family, I have 4 kids in my family, and biggest gap is 4 years. And that's not too bad because you're almost within striking distance of high school and things like that. But you get to be 6 years out. I mean, heck, when you're a senior in high school, your younger siblings in 6th grade. I mean, that's a big difference.
Right.
Okay. Now, did your mom work, or was she just a homemaker? What was your mom doing?
So my mom, I still call her the Tasmanian Angel. So she's 4'10". She's the only grandma I know that actually wears out the grandkids. Like the grandkids are begging, abuela, abuela, which is grandma in Spanish, abuela, please put us to bed. Please put us to bed. Because she stayed at home. So she was teaching Spanish at OU, at Oklahoma University, while my dad was going to med school when they met. But then once, they got married and he started his medical stuff, she just stayed home and raised myself and my sister.
So did your dad graduate from OU?
So he did. He got burnt out his second year of med school, and so he took a couple years off, and his taking a couple years off, he got his PharmD degree, so he's got his pharmacy degree, and then that was his idea of taking some time off, and then he went back to med school and finished out med school. So he was a genius brain of a guy. It was incredible having him as a dad.
So was he a big Boomer Sooner fan when you were growing up?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because you played football, right?
I did at the University of Northern Colorado, but my dad was a Husker. And so
wow.
When we were kids growing up, I mean, the day after Thanksgiving was Husker Oklahoma Day,
That's right.
And when we're talking back in the day, that was usually for at least the Orange Bowl, and many times it was 1 versus 2 or 3 versus 4. So, man, when the conferences blew up and they started all that realignment nonsense, that just killed me because that was one of the best rivalries in all of football. I mean,
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And
epic.
Yeah, and we're not too much different in age. So, when you're watching Jamal Holloway run the option, man, that kid was amazing.
Right. That's right.
But there were some epic games, absolutely epic games, and so that was as close to being religious football in my mind was the Oklahoma's the NU games and stuff.
That's right. That's right.
You used to watch Barry Switzer be such the brash individual, and Heck, now he wouldn't even be brash. He'd just be another guy. So,
right. And Bosworth, big Bosworth back
yeah,
in the day.
Bosworth
Yeah.
talking his trash and stuff. And yeah, those are big days. And so, you watch those teams and, and that was power football. And again, not to be getting off on this craziness, but, when you're running the option and both teams, Nebraska ran the power I, which is a variation of the option, and then, Oklahoma running the pure option. That's big boy football because you're moving somebody out of the way. You're forcing somebody to be in a different place. Passing game's great. I've been a Bronco fan, so Elway and Manning and that kind of stuff. But man, that option, if you ran it right, you scored a touchdown on every play. So that's man football. And there's nothing more pretty, in my opinion, when you've got a quarterback that takes that jump, stop, hops, goes down the line, and then either decides to keep or then pitch or pitches 5, 6, 8 yards downfield. I mean, how many times did you see that? Billy Sims or Steve Sewell, some of those backs that, those quarterbacks would be out there, be 6 yards downfield, and all of a sudden they pitch that ball and just go to the next level. So
well, and it's funny you brought that up because I went to college at WestPoint, right? And they because of their recruiting standards and limitations, because they can't recruit the 6'8", 340-pound linemen and stuff because they have to still fit the Army standards. They still run option and so they do not. Their WestPoint is not known for their passing game.
No. Well, none of the academies are. Navy,
right.
Air Force, none of them. And the thing that's always awesome is that those teams surprise so many D1 teams because they just don't see the option. They don't see it week in and week out.
Right.
And they don't know. And most defensive players are not disciplined enough to stay their assignment, on that. And so, that's assignment football and that's man football. I mean, it just is. I love it and stuff. And
yes.
I grin from ear to ear whenever I see one of the academies beat somebody else that they're not supposed to beat. And I was always hated Notre Dame. So when Army, I had an obnoxious friend, okay? And he was like this big Notre Dame guy. And you'd swear that they were all Jesus because they would all walk on water. So when Army, Navy, and Air Force would go in and kick their butt, it was such a pleasure to rub it into his face.
Right.
And you'd think for the longest time that was the only competition that Notre Dame ever played. They played the academies, they'd play the Citadel, which is like, come on. And then they'd reach out once or twice and play, USC or somebody. But other than that, it was kind of the cupcakes. And I used to just love it when a wishbone team would just go in and beat the crap out of them. So.
That's great. That's
funny.
great.
All right, so we'll get off the football thing and we'll sit here and talk football for hours. So, so you went off to high school and then you went on to college, right? So you went to WestPoint, okay?
Right.
Wow, tell us a little bit about that. That's not exactly an easy thing to do. You have to have a massive recommendation to get into WestPoint, right?
Yes, you've got to either have a congressman, senator, something like that kind of recommendation. And the way that happened, I remember I was a junior in high school. My mom sat me down and I was in my bedroom. She's like, "Okay, son, like, where do you want to go to college? What do you want to do?" And I said, "Man, I have no idea. Like, I just want to get challenged in every area of my life. So whatever the hardest school is that I can possibly attend, that's where I want to go." So whether that's, at the time, I honestly didn't even know about a military academy. So I'm like, well, I could go to some Christian school and okay, that maybe challenge me spiritually. I could go to some high-speed Ivy League school if I could even make it and get challenged academically.
Yeah.
But, man, I really want to get challenged in every area, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, every single way. And so, we had a conversation. I applied to some schools and I'm trying to think, maybe a week or two later, I was walking to one of my high school buddies who graduated a year before me. I saw him, at I don't know, it was a basketball game or football game. I'm like, "Hey, bro, like, where have you been? Where'd you go to school?" He's like, "Well, I went to this place called WestPoint, but I just dropped out after my freshman year because I got a pilot slot at Emory-Riddle. And
wow.
So I've always wanted to fly, so I quit WestPoint." I'm like, "Well, what is this WestPoint deal?" He's like, "Oh man, they yell at you, they scream at you, they make you do push-ups." I'm like, "Sign me up for that deal, man. That's where I want to go." And so he's like, "Well, dude, it's really hard to get in." And I said, well, I'm going to apply. And of course, they can for sure tell me no. But man, if I could get into that place, that sounds amazing. And so we applied to, I missed my application to the Air Force Academy by a day. So I missed my deadline for that. But I applied to Naval Academy and to West Point. I got accepted to the Naval Academy. So I'm like, oh, I guess I'm going to the Naval Academy. And then a month later, West Point sent me their application or their acceptance. And hey, man, I guess I could, so now what do I do? Right. So what do I do now? And so prayed about it. And I did my whole pros and cons list, or I want to stay on a boat with 5,000 other dudes for, 6 months at a pop, or do I want to be out in the woods? I'm like, I want to be in the woods, man. kind of thing. And so that's how I ended up choosing West Point.
Well, that's great. The Navy is an amazing branch of the military, but I don't know. I never would have been drawn to being stuck on a big can for, 6 months at a time. I just, and I'm too much of I get nauseous, kind of thing. So I don't know if I would have ever done the Navy. I don't think I ever would have done that. So
well, it's funny because we homeschool our daughter, and we've been homeschooling now for like 9 years. So one of our real close friends here in Colorado Springs, their son just graduated just a week or two ago from homeschool high school kid who just got accepted to the Naval Academy.
Oh, nice.
And so he's going to be going the end of the month. And so of course I've got to bust his chops. Come on, Squid, let's see if we can give him a hard time. But obviously it's a tremendous honor and privilege. And I know this kid is a rock star. He's going to absolutely crush it. So, and I've got one of my other classmates who went to West Point. His son just graduated from West Point, and his daughter just finished her freshman year at the Naval Academy. So their Army Navy games are going to be interesting.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like that would be a lot of fun. Those are fighting words in the first place. Then you add the family element onto it.
That's right. Talk about emotional intelligence, right? In that dynamic, right?
Exactly. So what discipline did you study? Obviously, you're going to West Point to become an officer. Was there any particular disciplines that you were studying within West Point then?
Yes, graduation was one of them, and the second one was teamwork.
Teamwork and graduation.
Because if it wasn't for my smart classmates, I tell people, some people never heard of it. It's a military academy, and folks who graduate, you go into the Army after that. Well, anyway, some people when they find out, oh no, but you went to West Point. I'm like, oh yeah, man, I went to West Point. Like, oh man, you must be really smart. I'm like, oh yeah, man, I'm really smart. I graduated at the bottom third of my class. And then I said, if I had a 4.0, they're like, you had a 4.0 at West Point. I'm like, oh yeah, man, I had a 4.0. I'm like, if you added up all 4 years,
I gotta know. That's great.
So, yeah.
So what was your first, where did you go after West Point then?
So majored in management, minored in computer science, and I got my branch choice. So because they do class rank, they rate you 3 ways: physically, academically, and militarily. Fortunately, what saved me was my military rank and my physical rank. I was pretty good at both physical and military. I did not do very well academically. So, but it got high enough where I was able to get my branch choice and my post choice, because they give you choices, but it's all based on class rank. Yeah. So I chose infantry was the branch that I chose, and then I chose Fort Bragg. North Carolina's the 82nd Airborne Division as my post, and so that's where I ended. So I had to went to airborne school, learn how to jump out of airplanes, and then infantry officer basic course, learn how to be an infantry guy, and then Ranger School, which is the Army's elite weight loss program. Yeah, if you're not familiar with Ranger School.
Yeah, I've had a few SEALs on, so you're the first Ranger. So
nice, awesome.
You're the very first Ranger, so that's great. So were you involved in any active deployments while you were in the 82nd, or?
So great question. So I was in between conflicts. So I got in after they had done the Haiti, a group of the 82nd guys had just gotten back from Haiti. And then I got out before September 11th kicked off. So I was in between conflicts. Now I did, it was a deployment technically, but it was not, it was a peacekeeping deployment. I've never been in combat. So I was stationed in Egypt for 6 months as a peacekeeping between Egypt and Israel. They were not big fans of each other. So they had, it's called a multinational force and observers mission, where there's 11 other nations that all linked up. And so I did that for 6 months, but that was it. And then I got out as a captain from the Army.
Okay. Yeah, it's nothing's changed there. We've seen that recently with what's going on with Israel. I mean, it's just
Right.
nuts. But the funny thing about the people don't get is like, don't mess with the Israelis. There's an example. That people just need to remember. If you go back to the '72 Olympics and those shootings that took place, the Israelis were patient, and then they hunted down everybody and killed them. I mean, that's just the way it works.
Right.
Everybody involved died, right? And it wasn't immediately, but you just don't mess with the Israelis. You just
Right.
don't. And so, and they have tried. Again, I'm not trying to make this a political thing, but it just drives me bananas because the media has run this in the wrong direction. But they've tried to make peace all the time. There've been 5 times that they have presented peace offerings to the Palestinians, and everybody around them has been involved with this. And all 5 times they've rejected it. And so it's just like, you know what? They've offered everything under the sun. It's crazy. It's absolutely
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And
It's a no jokes, it's a no joke situation and scenario. Yeah. And it goes back, right? It goes back a
forever.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
ways.
And and they keep, they're scorekeepers, man. They keep score about everything. So they remember just about everything. So it's a rough part of the world to be in. And now, what was the climate? Where were you specifically in Egypt?
So it's the Sinai Peninsula,
Yeah.
the very southern tip there on the Red Sea. We would go swimming every day in the Red Sea, which is really cool. Me and my buddy would swim a mile a day. It's called well, let's see, South Camp yeah, South Camp was where we were at. North Camp was about 45 minutes to an hour away, hour and a half away. So we were it's called man, I want to say Nama Bay was real close to where we were at, but it was the southern camp, literally on the Red Sea.
On the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was an incredible experience.
So looking back on that time, was there anything particular that sticks out in your mind that you remember, or a lesson that you learned from being in Egypt over there?
So yeah, so I guess that's a good question, Rex. I would say, and this ties into emotional health and emotional intelligence, but like people, if you look at a person as an individual, we have so many similarities.
Yeah.
When we throw on some stereotypes, we throw on some labels, we throw on some generalizations, that's when stuff can go sideways. Because I was able to, while we were there in Egypt, obviously got to hang out with 11 other nations and Egypt, a lot of Egyptians, and then also we went over to Israel and got to hang out with a lot of Israelis. And individually, all those groups there's some amazing people, some just great people, a lot of them family oriented, family people, have kids, and just some wonderful people. And I think, just seeing, because I've got a lot of my friends. In fact, when I came, we lived in North Carolina for 23 years before we moved to Colorado.
Right.
And I was the minority in my social circle. We went to an all black church for probably 8 years, like literally the only white couple there at this all black church we went to for like 8 years. And if we looked at each other as individuals and not stereotyped as, oh, you're a white old bald guy with a gray beard, or you've got tattoos, so that clearly meet whatever the little gaps we fill in. So I just learned, like, man, we're like, there are so many great people around this world that if we can take each person as an individual, and then also, I'm a cheesy quotes guy, John Maxwell quote here: seek first to understand, then be understood.
Yeah.
Like, Rex, you need to understand all about me, and my way is the only way and it's the right way. Well, that's not how the world works, right? So let me understand where Rex is coming from and what's his perspective and what's his context. And I think that would go a long way in relations and relationships and getting along with each other.
Well, it's so true. And I expand on that as the fact that we have gotten so involved with so many people wanting and needing validation. It is like the root cause of so many problems. So we have a culture from sort of the millennials down where, it was the participation trophy world, people. And these kids were raised and they were idolized, and, everything was, wonderful and that kind of stuff. And now they got out in the real world And it's hard, you know, and mom and dad aren't standing there every day validating them and those types of things. And so, you know, my observation is currently there's just so many minority groups that feel like they need to be validated, or anybody does. And so they get so caught up in the validation that they forget to be exactly what you are. Hey, we're so much the same. And, you know, I think that's what causes problems is we just spend so much time trying to be validated. And it's just, you know what, everybody wants to be loved. I get it. All right. But, you know, that quote by Maxwell is really, you know, seek to understand, you know, and if we do that, and if people just listen a little bit more and then accept some of the validation, you know, it's an interesting world right now. It really is crazy. It really is.
It is. You know, and then from the EQ perspective, the emotional intelligence, emotional health space, what's been fascinating is, and you alluded to it there, is what is the emotional health or the emotional intelligence of a country, of a nation?
Yeah.
And that impacts also how, you know, look at our, if any other nation outside of America looks at America, how would they rate our overall emotional health or emotional intelligence, right? Well, as a nation.
The first word that comes to my mind, and it is a family show, but I say batshit crazy is how everybody would look at it.
Right, probably so.
It's crazy right now. It's absolutely crazy. You know, I became an aficionado of emotional intelligence probably 10, 12 years ago. And there was a book out, a small book, you know, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And it literally was almost like a pamphlet. I mean, that book, it was, you know, so small. I mean, they reduced the size of the book, you know, printed, and it wasn't, the pages were well spaced. And it's like, well, this could have been a white paper. But anyway, it was such a great book because it just had, you know, emotional intelligence, how that was angled. 2.0 was helping people understand, you know, communications and business and stuff. And, you know, if people would just slow down and stop running their lives unchecked with their emotions, you can have such a different outcome in so many things. But we have this culture that goes back to my little point about being validated, and then they're all about their emotions. It's like, hey, take a step back, take a deep step back and get the emotion out of this stuff and be intelligent. I mean, if you go out on social media today, and I'll try not to get on a soapbox here, but if you go out on social media, and I follow our lovely governor here in the state of Colorado. He and I don't see eye to eye on anything, I don't think. You know, he is an interesting cat. And so I follow his thread. And the reason I follow his thread is I don't want to get it filtered from somebody else. Okay. So yes, I'm at odds at most everything the guy does, right? I mean, I just, you know, ideologically, I'm just different than him. But if I make a comment about that, anything there, it's not that anybody wants to have a discussion. They come after me. And that's just like, where's your emotional intelligence to say, hey, okay, I disagree with you, Rex, and for X, Y, and Z. No, they want to say you're this, that, this, you're this fat old bald guy. I mean, I've been called every name under the sun. It's like, so I'll respond. I'm like, well, that's quite the contribution to the conversation, attacking me. So how about you bring a counterpoint? And it is such a demonstration of no emotional intelligence. It's just, you know, and people just want to cancel you. They want to beat you up if they can't have a conversation. And it's like, man, did you ever get any training on how to communicate with people?
Well, so I think, so I have a little, maybe a little different perspective. While I agree with the end result of what you're saying there, how we got there, I have a little different perspective. And
Sure.
Here's the only reason I say that, Rex, is because I have been emotionally clueless 98% of my life.
Oh yeah, it's so easy to do.
And I tell people, like, you know, and this is not, I'm not trying to get spiritual or preach to anybody, but if you did not believe in God, the fact that Noble, an airborne ranger, jump master, infantry officer from the 82nd Airborne Division, is now teaching emotional intelligence, that is a sign that there is a God in heaven. Yeah. Because I am the last guy that should be talking to anybody about emotional health or emotional intelligence. And what I have found is, and statistically too, a lot of, I read EQ stuff, right? That's my world now. So the last 3 or 4 years, so statistically 70% of people cannot accurately identify how they feel.
Yeah.
and cannot describe it. So, and here's the thing, and our generation, my generation, I know my parent, in fact, this is kind of how I came. I didn't say this part of my childhood, but my childhood. So have a very, very strong mom. So Hispanic mom, a lot of Hispanics, very strong will, strong personality. My grandma, my aunts and stuff. And so in my house, the way we handled conflict was we would yell and scream at each other.
Yeah.
And whoever yelled the loudest won. And then we'd stomp off to our respective corners of the house, come back an hour later and act like nothing ever happened. Literally, we just get done cussing each other out and just ripping each other to shreds. And then an hour later come back and say, hey, so what's for dinner? Or, hey, how'd the Bears do? And so I learned my entire childhood how to stuff and avoid my emotions and feelings. Hey, these don't exist. They're not important. So I know for our generation, most of the people, our generation, we've never been trained on how to identify, process, or manage our emotions. And so again, you can't teach what you don't know. So like I didn't get it from my parents. Well, guess what? That gets passed on. How many folks from our generation, taught their kids emotional intelligence? Not very many. And so why do we have, not just our generation, but I feel that, Gen Y, the millennials and Gen Z that are not super healthy emotionally, they've never been trained on how to identify, process, or manage their own emotions. So the downside, and that's the thing about emotional intelligence, it's not about, hey, let's all become warm, fuzzy, kumbaya, hugging and kissing, bromance all the time. That's not the point. The point is so that we can identify, manage our own emotions, and now we can control our emotions rather than letting our emotions control us, which again, look at the news, look at the media. Everybody, that's extreme, but many people do not know how to manage or control their emotions, and that's why we're in a situation.
Oh yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I mean, that's an eloquent way to say it, because if you're running around and you're making your decisions based on your emotions, you're going to be a mess. And we see so much of that today, and so many people have never been taught that. I mean, I'm one of these people that I raised 5 kids. I participated in almost every method of education, charter schools, public schools, a little bit of homeschooling, those types of things. We need to blow the whole thing up. And there's some things we need to be teaching, even the secondary, the fact that we have these kids that have $100,000 debt and they've got a liberal arts degree in, fine art, development or something. We need to blow the whole thing up. And there's some basic things that need to be taught. There need to be some basic courses in money. There need to be basic courses in emotional intelligence. There needs to be basic courses in understanding like how to manage like a small business, because so many people now work in gig, type situations where they're self-employed, they're a 1099. There's just so many things. And, with YouTube and the resources that you have in your pocket with these powerful computers, you can learn all that fine art stuff if you have an interest in it. I mean, there's no reason to spend money on those things, but they ought to teach some basics on that. I think emotional intelligence is huge on that. But real quick, if you could, in case people are following along, because a lot of people do, what's your website so people can get, to find you real quick?
Sure. So it's EQforentrepreneurs.com.
Okay.
EQforentrepreneurs.com. It's our YouTube channel, our podcast.
Fantastic.
All the same name there.
Okay. So let's back up a little bit here, because we missed some parts of this story. You got out because, again, you just didn't fall out of the sky to be Mr. EQ right now. So there were some hops. You got out of the military as a captain. Then what'd you do?
So, and obviously, so here's another example. So I told you my childhood emotionally.
Yeah.
So grew up in an environment where we never talked about emotions and feelings.
Well, and I can tell you, because I have some Latino of experience in our own family, you didn't win many of our arguments. I know that. All right.
That's right.
Your mom's 5'10", but a Latino woman, I'm sorry, no, you're not winning many things.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You and your dad probably thought you did, but no, you never won. So let's just call a spade, right?
That's right. That's right. And so after that childhood experience, and I don't say that to rip on my parents because I had amazing
No, it's just what
parents.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very thankful, but just we they didn't know, and so of course they didn't teach it. So then from there, I went to WestPoint. We're not talking about feelings and emotions.
No. Push-ups and you screaming at you, right?
Right. And then then I go into airborne school, infantry school, ranger school, and then the 82nd. We're definitely not talking about feelings and emotions.
No, they're not sending any therapists over to you because you just jumped out of a plane and you're sitting somewhere freezing your hiney off in a field somewhere. No,
that's right. There aren't
any therapists coming over to hug you.
That's right. But again, here's and then I became an entrepreneur for over 20 years and have been a part of over 10 different startups. And what's fascinating is, people, okay, that's another thing I like to say. We are all on the receiving end of our own emotional intelligence. So meaning this, I'm on the receiving end of your emotional intelligence right now, and you're on the receiving end of my emotional intelligence right now,
right,
or lack thereof. And so so many of these bad leadership experiences that we have, like I did in the military, corporate America, doesn't matter where you've got two people, you're going to experience each other's emotional healthiness or emotional unhealthiness. And so, but a lot of people don't realize that it's emotional intelligence or emotional health that is causing these poor leadership behaviors, these poor leadership decisions, and not realize that's what's causing. So they try to fix the hey, let's just put a different color Band-Aid on it and call it leadership training or whatever. Dude, if you're emotional unhealthy, guess what? They're going to continue to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right? We were talking about health and fitness earlier. I'm down 50 pounds in 8 months. And people say, well, what diet are you using? What diet? It's my emotional health has gotten better.
Yeah.
And because I've gotten emotionally healthier, now I've been able to follow. I'm doing intermittent fasting. So I am using a tool, if you will. But I have, and it's so funny you said Bill Phillips. I have bought, no joke, Rex, I have probably bought 75 Body for Lifes because I would get 10 pages in or 10 days in, and then I'd fall off the bandwagon and self-sabotage because I wasn't emotionally healthy. But I had no idea that that's what the issue was. So for me, anyway, so circle back, I experienced a lot of emotional unhealthiness in the military, and there still is a truckload of emotional unhealthiness. Right now they're dealing with, trying to help out suicide prevention, the equity and diversity, and then also sexual harassment stuff. Well, and is EQ the answer to everything? No, it's not the answer to everything. But I guarantee if we helped get these soldiers to be more emotionally healthy, all of that stuff would drop. Would it stop? No, I'm not saying it would stop, but I'm saying it would drop tremendously. So then after the military, I started a network marketing company, a network marketing business actually, was involved with that for 20 years, made 7 figures, financially independent at 30 years old. My wife was financially independent, replaced her income at 27 years old, replaced my income at 30 years old. And then about that time, we both got, so then one of the guys on our business team was a hardcore narcissist. Didn't know what narcissism was. Don't know that I've ever experienced narcissism before.
Sure.
This dude, man, I was like, holy cow, this guy is on a whole other level. And so about the same time we were experiencing this guy, hardcore control and manipulation, very toxic relationship, very toxic leader. About the same time, I yelled at my wife. We've been married for 20 years. I yelled at my wife 3 times in the span of 3 weeks. And she said, dude, 3 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. Number 2, you've never done this before, which means number 3, you got issues. And so I was like, oh, snap, you're right. I don't normally yell at you. What's going on? We went to counseling, this counselor, and this counselor introduced me to these revolutionary new concepts called feelings and emotions. I was like, what is this craziness you're talking? Is this voodoo? Is this magic? What's going on here? And so started to jump into all this emotional health, emotional intelligence stuff, realized I was very, very emotionally unhealthy. I had no emotional coping tools or mechanism. They were all unproductive, unhealthy. I was a food addict. I was a people pleaser addict. Name it. I was, unhealthy, very emotionally unhealthy. And so once I started to grow and change emotionally, I'm like, holy cow, like all these areas of my life are changing, Rex. My family, my faith, my parenting, my finances, my business, all these things were changed. I'm like, I had no idea that all these areas of my life were attached to my emotional health. I'm like, babe, I can't be the only emotionally clueless guy out there. There's got to be other nobles out there. And that's when we started the podcast.
So how long have you had the podcast up?
So actually February of last year. So right when the pandemic kicked in.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. So what was the pivot point that made you, what was the aha moment for EQ? I mean,
it was the counseling. So we probably did a year and a half of counseling. And when he introduced me to this whole concept of feelings and emotions, and I realized, wow, how am I probably in the third quarter of my life and not have a clue about emotional health or emotional intelligence? Because it's different. Like some people say, oh, hey, I read this book on fill in the topic, whatever
Sure.
I read this book on marriage, so I'm great at marriage and relationship. No, dude, that's not how it works, right? So, and emotional health, that's the thing, is you can't get emotionally healthy just by reading a book. You've got to do work. And the unfortunate thing about emotional health and emotional intelligence is it's not sexy, it's hard, it takes time, it's a process. And so for me, I'm trying, right, what I've noticed is there are two types of people that know about EQ: your C-level people, your big corporate executives, and your academic people. Everyone else in between does not know a lot about it. And so I want to try to bring it to the masses, and hopefully help other people get emotionally healthier so that they have better relationships, better marriages, better parenting,
Sure.
all those things.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was introduced to EQ in a corporate environment. Okay. So the company I worked for at the time, we were really big on reading. And so we would read a book every quarter. Okay. And so this was just one of the assignments, so we read, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And so, but it was great because it was something that opened it up. But you're right. I didn't know anybody else had even heard of it, unless you're some sort of an academic. And, people don't understand is that whenever there's conflict, it rarely has to do with the tactical issue. Okay. It's about the feelings that tactical issue created, So if you get yelled at by your spouse because you left your shoes by the door, it has nothing to do with the shoes by the door. It has the fact that her feelings were hurt or his feelings were hurt because they felt disrespected. Okay. And that's the end of the game, right? I mean, and so once you understand that, then, okay, then you can validate, oh, well, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. But so many people run around, and it's fun as a parent. Now, my kids are 18 through 26. I just became a grandparent a year back.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So, oh man, it is so awesome. But, to watch them now, and of course, they're still in that stage where, dad doesn't know anything, kind of stuff. I mean, they're coming around. But to watch the emotions and to watch the decisions made on emotions. And, I'm like, I got a book for you, but nobody wants to read it. And had you ever think about doing, that last interaction of conflict? Did you think this way? And of course, they don't want to hear that. So it's interesting to people watch, even just my own kids, to see what's happening, because no, I've got smart kids. I've got one that's got a master's in behavioral science. I've got one that's in med school. I got one that's becoming a pilot, kind of thing. I got really sharp kids all the way around, and they're good kids. But, there's still so much emotion that they're running their lives by. So how deep, I mean, you got all certified on this stuff. What was your journey like in EQ? Because obviously you know a lot about this. You're not just a surface person. You're teaching this and you're delivering it today. What was that journey like?
Yeah, great again question, Rex. So how I think we fit in this space maybe a little bit different than many other EQ people. Okay. Is that I don't have a PhD from Harvard, or I don't have a master's degree in behavioral science from Yale or Stanford. I'm an entrepreneur, so my journey has been I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, many, over 10 different startups. Most of them have been failures. And for me, the journey has to and through EQ has been, not because, hey, at some point, hey, I want to study this so I can teach it and have a, again, be an instructor. This is because of my own life transformation. This is for my own life, like change and application, not, hey, Rex, let me teach you this theory that I read when I was at Harvard. Like, no, Rex, let me tell you, I yelled at my wife last week. I was being stupid. Let me tell you the lessons that I learned, talking to my wife. And so a lot of our podcast is literally me sharing my failures. This is how I screwed up today. Yeah. Here are 3 things that I learned, and maybe it'll help you in your journey. So it's been 100%. Now, obviously, I've read tons of books on emotional health, emotional intelligence, that kind of thing. And so, but it has not just been an academic journey. It has been a total application journey, taking that content, figuring out what the lessons, and for me, breaking it down. Okay, well, why did that work for me? Okay, why did that not work for me? Why am I still getting triggered? Why am I still getting angry? And really breaking that down and say, okay, how can I share these lessons with other people? That's kind of where our EQ course got birthed out of, our 8-week EQ course. And so that's kind of what our journey has been like.
Okay. Well, it's a different world, I'm not discrediting anybody that's getting, the deep academic, from schools and stuff like that. Hey, I've got a daughter in med school, so why would I ever say anything against that? However, so many experts in this world are doing what you're doing. I've had several guests on that have been practical learning, hands-on learning, and now they're experts in those fields. I mean, guy we talked about off the line, back, Bill Phillips, a friend of mine from clear back in the day. Bill doesn't have a degree in anything in science. He basically did it real world experience. He was one of the smartest guys I ever met. And his, how he created EAS, the nutrition supplement company, which is coming back because he bought the brand back from Abbott Labs. EAS stands for Experimental and Applied Scientists. He was trying to build a legal steroid. And he is the world's foremost expert on creatine and all these things he invented and stuff. He doesn't have any degrees in those things. It's real world. So, I don't think people are just to the point where you're like, oh, I got to have a doctorate at this or doctorate at that. There's so many experts out there now who've lived things. And that's as important as just having to read about things.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And definitely did not want to take anything away from, the academics and stuff like that as well, because obviously there's a place for that and there's value. And I'm sure a bunch of them have applied that stuff as well. I did not go an academic route to learn about EQ and with the intent of like, hey, let me be a professor at some point. I got there by the hard knocks kind of thing through application and personal application for sure.
No, for sure. So when you're delivering this in a somewhat online and hands-on, tell us a little bit about how you're doing that today.
So, there's different learning styles, and I want to make sure that we hit, the big learning styles. So we have an 8-week course so we cover the model that we use is the industry kind of standard model from Daniel Goleman's, emotional intelligence book, which is great. It's very, a lot of detail, a lot of technical stuff. I wouldn't recommend folks start there because again, I'd recommend starting at Emotional Intelligence 2.0, that book you recommended, because it's kind of a higher level perspective of it. But we cover the 4 main domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social management. Yeah. And we share our lessons learned from and give real tools throughout each of the modules. So each of the 4 modules has 10 to 12 5 to 10 minute video lessons that we unlock every 2 weeks. So the first week is on self-awareness, and they can go through, it's kind of self-paced again through videos. We also have a super cool workbook that they can download and work through the workbook while they're going through the videos. And then weekly, we have a group discussion on Zoom where we're discussing, okay, so the first 2 weeks we discuss self-awareness. What are the things you're learning? How are you learning? How can you take it deeper? How is it impacting you? How can you be more intentional? The second 2 weeks, we're talking about self-management, and then so on and so forth. So that's kind of how our course works. And then after that, we have a membership for those that go through the course, a monthly membership that folks can choose to join in or not once the course is done.
That's so great. I think you're doing a really smart thing there. I see a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people who have self-paced courses. And again, that model is okay for some people, but it's not for everyone. The reinforcement of, having that weekly call and the dialogue to check in and having the ability to ask questions. And then it's not am I crazy to think this way? Am I alone? Am I the only person that's doing it this way? So I think that's really wise. I recently interviewed a guest that's coming up here, and she has she has a course as much delivered like yours. It's a mix for teenagers, and it's just how to manage money. And it's just, she's doing it from Dubai, and it's an amazing program, but she gets teenagers' parents involved before they take the class. There's the right type of follow-up things, exercises, and then the kids take the courses, but then they're involved in actual webinar, delivery of it. So I think that's a good way, because those who are fast at learning on self-learning, self-paced, they can go, but that reinforcement's so huge, and the interaction, that I'm not the only one dumb enough to be thinking this way or feeling this way.
No, that's great, Rex. And what we've found is, so our course and content is not for the person that is, that has been working on their emotional health for 20 years and that is very emotionally healthy. Our kind of target audience are those people that, hey, dude, I'm kind of new to this space.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about it. It's kind of, foreign Chinese to me right now. And I'm going to need some, and that's how I started, right? I had no concept about emotions or feelings. There was one time I remember in one of my I call it intense family fellowships with my wife, an argument,
Yeah.
an IFF, where I was just out of the blue, I started crying, like literally tears coming out. And she's like, and I cry way more than my wife does. She's hard as woodpecker lips, but I started crying, and she's like, dude, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I literally have no idea. She's like, okay, Noble, let's start at the top. We're going to start with some kindergarten questions, right? With emotions. Are you happy or sad or mad? And I'm like, babe, I honestly can't even answer that. I didn't even know the answer. why I was crying, or why I got emotional, if I was happy, sad, or mad. I didn't even know that. So, this course is very much, I want it to be a safe place for people that are starting off, that like me, that don't have a clue about emotional health or emotional intelligence. And the thing is too, most people are walking around with emotional injuries that have been piled up because they don't have the tools to know how to deal with them.
Right.
And this is one of the things I say in my podcast all the time. Unaddressed emotional issues do not get better over time.
No.
They actually compound. And so we wonder why everyone's all up in our feels and all up in our emotions and getting triggered all the time, because we have decades of emotional injuries that have never been addressed or never been healed before. And so this, our course and our content is for people that are kind of new in this journey of emotional health and emotional intelligence.
Well, that's really smart, and it is so needed across the world. And again, we were talking about, the social media stuff, and there's so many people that walk around and they don't even realize they are just controlled by their emotions, and there's just no maturity on any of this. And it's, I'm always poking people in the eye on social media. It's like, you need some emotional intelligence on this, because you're not contributing to the conversation. You're just getting mad, and then you're mad and your feelings have you upset, and then you say stupid things, and it's just like, well, there's no intelligence to that. There's nothing
right.
at all.
Well, and you just described an actual physiological thing, Rex, is that by definition, when we are emotional, our logic is not engaged. We are not. So it's, what you're saying is scientifically accurate, not just a good observation of society and people and social media. It is an actual scientific fact. When we are emotional, we are not being logical.
Not at
Now,
all.
and that's not to say that, well, hey, you should just, again, stuff and avoid your emotions, because I have PhDs in that. Like, I can teach you how to stuff and avoid your emotions.
Right.
But that's also not healthy, because, again, physiologically, I didn't really know any of this stuff until starting this stuff, is that it's actually how our brain works. Every decision that we make every day goes through our emotional center of our brain before it even makes it to our logical center. So you can say, hey, don't think about your emotions and making a decision. It's physiologically impossible to do that. You have to. And so rather than avoiding it and say, well, I'm just going to stuff my emotions. No. Emotions are signs. They're not good. They're not bad. It's data. So what is the data of your emotions telling you so that you can make more informed decisions?
Well, and we talked a little bit about this off air about, marketing and stuff. The most effective marketing is the ones that hit feelings. I mean, it absolutely do. And then it's almost, and when you understand that, because everything that's bought's bought by feelings. Once you understand that as someone who's marketing something, it's almost like fishing in a trout farm. It almost is, because you just realize the way the brain works. And then if you're bringing people in, and I have a technique that I use that I didn't invent, but I've integrated it with some neuroscience things. And once you know how to get with people's emotions, it's like messing with little kids from a marketer's perspective.
Right. Sure. Well, no, anyway. You brought up another good point, Rex, because there is a downside to emotional intelligence. We're going back to that narcissist. Some people use the knowledge of emotional intelligence to manipulate or control people, in a positive way. For people that are using it in a positive way, it's influence, right? Leadership, again, John Maxwell quote, leadership is influence. And so you've got to be aware, again, and now that I've got more emotional health, emotional intelligence, I can sniff a controller and a manipulator a mile away now. But before, I was in a very toxic, unhealthy organization where controlling and manipulating was their MO. It was very, using disappointment, shame, guilt, and fear to lead, influence, or control people, which again are not healthy leadership tools in my opinion.
Sure. No, it's amazing. I mean, it is, once people understand how to use the tool, and I'm not an expert like you, but I know how to use it from a marketing perspective. It's really unfair. It really is unfair.
Right.
So, and we don't do anything that's manipulative to people, but they don't even realize what's happening when we do these things. So
sure. Well, yeah. Anyway, that's a good point. Definitely.
Well, it's been a delight to have you on and tell your story and hear what you're up to. Again, throw out your website again.
Yeah, so it's eqforentrepreneurs.com.
Okay. We'd love to have you back again. What's on the horizon? What's next?
So funny that you asked. So I am going through a course right now that is going to, it's a national publicity course, so that I paid $5,000 to get in front of 80 media producers and influencers and big giant podcasters and stuff like yourself, and they're going to teach me how to kind of do my pitch in 30 seconds, and then the producer has a minute and a half to kind of ask me questions and engage, and so with the goal of hopefully expanding the reach and expanding the audience and that kind of thing. So and one of the things that they talked about was, the good thing is about emotional intelligence is that topic has mass appeal, especially in the past year and a half of the pandemic and isolating people and the consequences of isolating social beings like, humans and stuff. And so it's a very, very relevant topic right now that can be applied to many, many different audiences and topics.
Like I said earlier, I feel it's a foundational skill that people need to have, because it's like money. Money touches every bit of your life. Emotional intelligence touches every bit of your life. It really does. And people don't understand that. And there's just so many people that are like zombies walking around. Just they don't even know what they don't know. They're unconscious incompetence because they don't even know that their whole life is being run by their emotions.
That's right.
And that's scary. And we're
Super scary.
seeing that, we're at levels that are just amazing with some of the politics and things that are going on and social things that are happening in their cultures and things. And it's like, if you're running your whole life by emotions, that's really scary stuff. That's really scary stuff. Well, I got one more question for you. You've been a delight to come on. We could talk for hours, but I always try to keep these at a roughly the same, attention span for our listeners. But I got one last question for you that I ask all my guests. And in the Western culture, we have this concept called a bucket list. And in fact, I've interviewed the bucket list guy. His name is Trav Bell. He's down in Melbourne, Australia. Episode number 60, if you want to. It is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious. He's a really much of a character. Well, as you know, being in the military, things that go up and go down, they have to come down. So there's an opposite of everything. There's another list we have out there that is opposite of a bucket list. The bucket list is things we want to do before we exit this world. Then there's another list. It rhymes with a bucket and starts with an F, but I won't say that because it's a family show. So it's the F-it list. So what might be an item or two that be on your F-it list? And I'll throw out an idea or two here just to kind of get the juices flowing. So for me, on the F-it list, I'm not going to have a large collection of pet snakes. That's never going to happen. I am never, ever again going to do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. The concept of excessive heat, excessive humidity, excessive drumming and chanting all at the same time. Not going to do that. And not doing sardines again. Did that once and not going there. So what might be an item or two that would be on Noble's F-it list?
That's awesome. So I will definitely, thankfully, not be emotionally clueless anymore the rest of my life. So that's definitely on my list. Also, I will never do ballet. That is definitely on my
okay.
And I've got friends that do it, and that's amazing. And but I will never. My family calls me Big Poppy. I'm a big guy, and I will never be in tights. I had to do tights when I was in English literature to do Romeo and Juliet. I am never doing tights again.
Well, for those who might be watching on YouTube, you'd understand why Noble is a big guy. And so that's a visual that you can paint in your mind if you're listening on podcast. Okay?
That's right.
And you're about to say one more.
Yeah, one more. Last thing is, if I have a choice, I will not ever live in redonkulously humid climates anymore.
Oh, I'm with you on that. I lived in Florida for a while, and that was pure hell. So when you step off an airplane and it feels like you just had a blanket put on you, and you can feel the air. No, that's
right. That's right. And Rex, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you taking that time even before we started the show. Again, I took a bunch of notes. Just thank you for your expertise and your wisdom, and it's such a pleasure interacting with you on here. I've learned a lot, and I'm excited to apply a lot of these notes to my own podcast.
Well, thank you for coming on. All right, so we'll call this an episode for this one today. We're thankful for everybody coming by, and please, again, stop by the show website. We have these conversations with our guests, and we just scratch the surface. There's so much more. So if you go to therexandrewshow.com, you can search for any of our guests, and we have profiles, links to their websites. And so it's just a good way to recap all the people we've interviewed, Noble's interviewed today. And then we have generally about 50 or so people that are in the queue to be interviewed. So there's a lot of interesting people that you can follow on. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Until next time, I'll say the things that I say every single time. Be safe, but be bold, and make it a great day.